So my name is Brady Whitton, and I welcome you to worship here at First United Methodist Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I welcome all those who are joining us online or on television. And today is the 4th of July, and so happy Independence Day, everyone. I've loved seeing all the red, white, and blue this morning. But today in worship, we're going to thank God for our nation and our many blessings. We're going to share in the Lord's Supper together, and we're going to explore one of Jesus' parables and see what it might have to say to us about what really matters in life.
Today's reading is from the Gospel of Luke. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who set me as judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly, and he thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and all my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So it is with those who store up for themselves treasures, but are not rich toward God.'" This is the gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
So this year, 27 United Methodist pastors retired in Louisiana. And that was a little bit higher than normal, but there have been a lot of retirements over the last several years. But what I noticed about this was that when I first came to Louisiana in 2000, I didn't know any of the people who were retiring. I really didn't. It was sort of like, who are those people? But now that I'm here for 23 years, I'm like, hey, wait a minute, I know those people. And some of them were like my close friends. And so my friends are starting to retire. And it just got me thinking. Now, I'm only 50. I've still got lots of years left to go. But again, I found myself thinking, how's my pension doing? Right? Let's go online, check those things out. Tosh and I have had lots of conversations. Are we making the best decisions that we can about our future? Are we being smart? What's the right age to retire? Will I have enough? How much is enough? Y'all ever wonder about these kinds of things? So all these things are going through my head, and as they are, this parable or this sort of nudge from Jesus starts coming my way. And this is, by the way, one of the advantages of knowing the Scriptures fairly well. I've been reading the Bible a long time, that the Bible can kind of speak from within you in this sense. So I'm thinking about retirement, and I'm thinking about this, and do I have enough, and are we this, and are we going to be comfortable, are we going to be secure, when the voice says to me, "Hey, Brady, you remember that parable that Jesus told about the rich fool?" Oh, yeah. And I went and I looked it up, and I found myself spending a lot of time with this parable this week, and it had some valuable things to say to me, and I thought, hey, maybe somebody out there needs to hear some of these things too. So let's revisit this parable a moment, okay? So a certain person has a financial windfall. That big deal finally comes through, or they finally get the big promotion, their business starts to boom, or for whatever reason, they finally find themselves getting financially ahead, right? They're not worried about how they're going to pay the bills anymore. They've got more than enough. And the person thinks to themselves, hey, I don't have any place to put all this stuff. What am I going to do? And so being a good planner, the person says, I know what I do. I'll open a Roth IRA. I'll buy some mutual funds. I'll invest in some property. Maybe I'll invest in Bitcoin. You know, that's apparently the thing to do now, right? Then I'll have everything I need. Then I'll have surplus. Then I will eat, I will drink, and I will go on a cruise where I will eat and drink more, right? Isn't that what you do on cruises, right? But then the parable takes a turn, and the person suddenly dies. Right when they've got it all set up, they die. And the thing that always strikes me about this parable is that God calls this person fool. Fool. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy that when the end of my life comes, God looks at me and says, "You fool," right? Now, I think Jesus' message here, the overall message is pretty clear. Don't be like this guy. But what I've found myself thinking about is, what mistakes did this man make? What life lessons can we learn from the man that God called fool? And so here's one. As I read through this parable, I thought, this guy thinks that life is going to be better because he has a bunch of stuff. He thinks life's going to be better because he's got a bunch of stuff. So just before Jesus tells this parable, he's talking to the crowd that's gathered around him about greed. And the reason he's talking about greed is that apparently someone's father has died. And as was typical in those days, the eldest brother was going to get the bulk of the inheritance. And that's just the way it worked. Sorry, ladies. And sorry to younger brothers out there, like the older brother was going to get most of it. Now, the younger brother might have gotten something, but he wasn't happy with the amount he was getting. And so he calls out to Jesus and he says, "Jesus, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. I want half. Half seems like a better arrangement to me." And now Jesus' response here is great, by the way. This is a whole nother sermon, but at least hear this much. Jesus says, "Hey, wait a minute. Don't get me in the middle of your argument." And here's a little wisdom from Jesus for you today. You don't always have to get in the middle of other people's stuff. But Jesus goes on and he says this: "Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. So what is Jesus saying here? Is he saying that possessions don't matter? Is that what he's saying? Is he saying we shouldn't have stuff? That you and I should live like ascetics or like renounce the world, wear burlap, and wander around with like monk? I mean, is that what Jesus is? Is that what he wants us to do? What do you think? I don't think that's what he's saying. Because the truth is, and you all know this, we need stuff to live, right? We need food to eat. We need roofs over our heads. We need clothes to wear. And it's nice to have a few nice things too, little niceties, right? Life is tough, and sometimes the stuff can be nice, right? Jesus actually tells us in the Lord's Prayer that we should pray for what? Give us this day our daily bread. And so God doesn't want us not to have stuff, right? And if you've ever lived this way, you know the truth of this. Life is hard when you don't know where your rent's coming from, and you're not sure how you're going to put food on the table for your family, and when the bill collectors are hounding you. That's not the kind of life God wants us to live. So what is Jesus saying here? What he's saying is this: don't get caught up in the more is better game. Don't get caught up in the more is better game. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions, he says. So I knew someone once, maybe you know a person like this, maybe you're a little like this, that no matter how much they had, it just wasn't enough. And they were always sort of angling for the next thing, right? You know, if I just had another $100 a week, if I just had another $500 a month, if I just had another $20,000 a year. But then the person would get to that place. They would get the promotion, or their business would start to go well, and they would start to make a little bit more money, and then what did they want? A little bit more money. Y'all know their famous John D. Rockefeller quote where he's asked at one point in time, how much money is enough? And he responds, just a little bit more, right? And so this guy's caught in this game. He thinks that more is better. But I'll tell you what, I've also known another kind of person, and that's people who have very little. People who have almost nothing. And yet they radiate joy and they radiate contentment, right? Where does that come from? That's what we need to figure out, right? But this guy's caught up in this. He thinks more is better, and he thinks that having more and more stuff is better. And Jesus says, nah, don't be like that guy. The second mistake I think the man made is this. He is waiting to truly live. He's waiting to truly live. So the man in Jesus' parable not only seems to think that being happy and having a lot go together, he's mismatched those two things. He also seems to think that his happiness or his contentment in life is out there someplace when the certain set of conditions have finally gotten just right. It isn't until after his barns are built and after his barns are full of stuff that he says, hey, now I'll take life easy and eat and drink and be merry. Now, one thing I want you to be sure of, this parable is not against eating and drinking and being merry. Sometimes people read this, oh, God doesn't want us to enjoy. Not true. It's not what this is about. It's not until after his barns are full and after he's got them full that he says, now I'll enjoy life. Now I'll enjoy the gift of everything that God has given me. Which begs the question, what was he doing before that? And I don't know if you noticed or not, but Jesus tells us that this man is already rich. It says the ground of a certain rich man produced abundantly. So he's already rich, but he's still got this idea in his mind that out there, somewhere in the future, when things are just right, then I'll be happy. Then I'll have enough. Then I'll enjoy life. So in January, some close friends and I took a trip to Big Bend National Park. That's a long story. But I woke up early one morning and I was down in the lobby of the hotel drinking a cup of coffee, people watching. Y'all do that? So I just sitting there drinking my coffee and watching these people. And all of a sudden, and I'm going to get in trouble with somebody for this elderly couple came down into the lobby out of the elevator. And by elderly, I'm thinking early to mid-70s. Sorry, I told you I was going to get in trouble here. Okay? They weren't moving real fast, okay? Now, somebody told me at the early service, they says, you know what the definition of elderly is, right? It's 20 years older than whatever age you are, right? But anyway, but my point, these people were not moving real fast, but they had all of their hiking gear on, and it was clear that they were going out for a day of hiking in Big Bend, right? And I found myself telling a story about this couple. That's part of people watching, right? You make up these little stories about people. And this is what I thought. I imagine them in their younger years saying things like, hey, honey, I'd like to go to the national parks. Wouldn't you like to go see the national parks? How many of you have said, I want to go see the national parks, right? But they said, but, we can't do it right now because life's really busy. And we got this new job that we got to do, and hey, let's wait. Maybe when we have kids, we can make it a family trip, or maybe after the kids move out, or maybe when we get the right raise, or maybe when we get enough money in the bank, or maybe when we retire, or maybe when we, right? Some other time, some other place. And I imagine them having this conversation, and I imagine them finally getting to the place in life where they said, now we can go to the national parks, now we can hike. The day had finally arrived. But I'm not sure that their knees and their hips were going to cooperate with their dreams. We all do it, right? We all do it. Now listen, there is some wisdom here. There are some things we have to plan for. Bowen, right? There are some things we have to save for. And there are things we have to work towards. That is all true. But there are other things that should not wait. John Lennon was famous for making this quote, but I think actually somebody else quoted it and he included it in a song. Life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. You ever hear that? Life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. Read a book this week, or saw the book. I didn't read the book, but this is the book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And they were interviewing people who were on hospice care. The end of their life was coming. And these were the things that they said mattered. These are the things you shouldn't put off. Having the courage to live your own life. Not somebody else's life, not what somebody else thinks you ought to be doing. All that social pressure, right, to do what other people want you to do. Have the courage to live your own life. Not working so much. Y'all have heard this, right? Nobody on their deathbed says, I wish I'd spent more time at work. Nobody. Showing your feelings more, right? Being honest about what's going on the inside. Sharing those things with people. Staying in touch with friends. That was the fourth one. And the last one was just being happy. Stop waiting. Just be happy. Now, I will tell you as a pastor, one of the things that I see people putting off a lot, I'm trying to figure out how to describe this, but it's really knowing and accepting your place with God. Really knowing and accepting your place with God. I hear people say all the time, I wish I had more time to read the Bible. I wish I had time to pray more. I wish I had more time for my life with God. But maybe some other time, right? I don't know how many of you get the Richard Rohr daily devotional email. I know a lot of our church members do. I don't read it every single day, but the subject line caught me this morning when I woke up and I said, okay, God, the realm of God is right here, right now, in the present tense. The realm of God is right here, right now, in the present tense. Stop putting off living in God's kingdom. Stop it. So this man in Jesus' parable, he gets everything finally set up the way he wants to. He's a good planner. He's been successful. He's got it all going in his direction. And literally, right about the time where he says, okay, I got it, he drops dead. And what does God say? You fool. You fool. Which brings me to the final thing about this guy. He thinks only about himself. So the parable, I mentioned, it starts with a windfall, right? The ground yielded an abundant harvest. And so seeing this, the man says to himself, what should I do? What should I do with this abundant harvest? What should I do with this plenty? And there are all kinds of ways that he could have answered that question. First of all, he could have given thanks to God, right? He could have dropped down on his knees and said, thank you, God, and sang a song of praise. I mean, that's one thing he could have done. He could have thought about God. He could have gone to the temple to make an offering of thanksgiving, which would have been a good Jewish thing to do. Good practice to say, God, I thank you by returning a portion of these blessings to you. He could have thought about the folks at the homeless shelter across town. He could have invited his friends to have a party. That would have been something. I think that would have been okay. Wow, I got blessed. Let's bless some other people. He could have bought his mom a house. You always hear people say that when they win the lottery, right? What are you going to do? I'm going to buy my mom a house. He could have done anything else, but not this guy. He doesn't think about God. He doesn't think about other people. He says, I know what I'll do. I'll buy a bigger house and drive a fancier car. And as God says at the end of the parable, you fool, what good will the stuff you bought yourself be now that you're dead? Someone once said this, the things you do for yourself are gone when you're gone, but the things you do for others, they remain. Think about that. The things you do for yourself are gone when you're gone, but the things you do for others, they remain. And I really think this is what Jesus is talking about when at the end of this parable he talks about being rich towards God. So you all are good Jesus followers, right? If we love God, what is the second thing that follows off after that? Who else do we love? We love others. They go together. And so when Jesus is talking about being rich towards God, I think what he's saying is, yes, remember God and give thanks to God for your blessings, but then use them to bless others, right? That's what it means to live a good life. So anyway, I'm thinking about my future, I'm pondering this parable, and these are some of the lessons that I gleaned. I would encourage you, go home, read the parable for yourself and see what God might say to you about this rich man that God called fool. Life's not going to be better because you have more and more stuff. Don't wait to truly live. Do the things that matter most now. And the greatest things in life are the things that we do for others, right? Those are some good lessons. And on the 4th of July, since it is the 4th of July, I want to add one final thought. So when I was growing up, I was taught, I remember singing the songs and hearing the stories and watching those little cartoons on TV about America. And how America stood for freedom, and America stood for equality, and America stood for opportunity. America stood for, give me your poor, tired, huddled masses, that whole thing. We were the land of the free, and we were home of the brave, and we were the country that stood up against tyrants, and we stood up for the underdog, right? We stood against tyrants and up for the right? That's us, right? Am I right? That's the America that I grew up with. That's the America that I fell in love with as a kid. It's the America that I want to be a part of. But more recently, I'm worried that our country is more like the fool in Jesus' parable. Our primary focus seems to have become about the economy and money, right? Can we get more? We want more because we think more is going to make us happy. But guess what? It doesn't. It doesn't. We seem to have strayed from things I think that all of us at one point in time would have said, these things matter, these things are important. Things like integrity and character and compassion and generosity and care for others, right? Those are the things that matter. But we seem to have started focusing on other things. And we seem, in many ways, to be thinking only about ourselves. Now look, I'm an optimistic person. I really think to be a follower of Jesus is to be an optimist. Those things go together. I also have a 16-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 10-year-old. I have to be an optimist. I love this nation. I don't think our best days are behind us. I still think our best days are ahead of us, right? I'm not a doom and gloom person. But I hope we can all agree that we need a course correction. We need a course correction. And isn't it interesting that today, the July 4th, fell on a Sunday? Here's my challenge to you. Let us, not only as individuals, but as a nation, learn from the man that God called fool. More is not going to make us happier. It's not all about the economy and money. There are important things that we should not put off. And let's stop thinking only about ourselves. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.